For the very last time, welcome to Foundations of Algorithms. Dr. John Jong and myself have been so happy and excited to teach you this semester and so proud of what you've achieved. But we're not quite at the end yet. We have a few more things to do today. Both Dr. John Jong and myself are going to give you a short preview of some of the research we do to get you excited for what directions algorithms could take you in the future. Then we're going to have a little bit of a chat about the class and about the exam, so what things we could do to improve the class, a few announcements, what to study as you head into what's going to be hopefully not too bad a period for all of you, and then we do have a closing goodbye. If you haven't already, feel free to come down to the front and take a slice of pizza or garlic bread. They're going fast though, so make sure to get some in. And with that, I'll turn it over to John Jong to take us away with a little bit of exciting algorithms research.
Okay, so what do I do in my research? Algorithms. Well, what kind of algorithms? The algorithms that I do primarily concerns a special kind of data, or spatial data, or sometimes we call spatial temporal data. You can think about it, space and time, they are sort of just a different angle of the same thing. What really is this spatial data? What it is? Spatial data is just data that has something to do with geo coordinates. Think about Google Maps that you probably use daily, or maybe not. But probably at least for the first time you get to Melbourne, you must be using some map application to get you here, right? So those are the things that I'm working on. Now, to give you a few specific examples of what kind of things I've developed, I'm going to show you a few slides. I'm not going to go into any technical details, so don't worry. You can think of it as just like listening to a general scientific talk. The first thing I'm going to mention is a traffic simulator. What does this thing do? Here, this is just a GIF image, which ultimately is a screenshot of a software that my team developed. What does it do is to try to simulate what the individuals, how they behave on the road network. Cars, ambulance, police cars, individuals, pedestrians, trains, how do they move? And using this kind of simulator, what we can achieve is that if you want to study, well, I'm not sure whether you're actually going that way, but this morning I just walked through the Haymarket, and there's this big roundabout where it's always congested. So if you want to make a change to make the transition a bit faster in that big roundabout, what kind of road you want to build? Will it be a crossover? Can we do a sort of underground tunnel? Can we add a traffic light? Those kind of things. But you can't really try it out and then say, well, it doesn't work, I'll just rebuild. It doesn't work that way, right? You want to sort of do a bit of simulation to study what would happen if I do that. And this simulator that we build is for that purpose. So that we can study for this kind of traffic kind of planning. Not necessarily to build new infrastructure, build a new road or anything. It could be as simple as how do we control the length of a particular traffic light. So in the busy hours of a certain direction, it might give you a bit longer time of the green light, and then other times it might just give you a red light. Right? In fact, if you have ever been driving, some of the sort of smaller streets, the traffic lights there actually they will never turn green unless there's a car that's always at the edge of the road, right? If you ever approach this kind of street at night and you park a bit too far away from the crossing line, you will never get a green light. but don't go too far, right? I'm not going to tell you to do that. So there's just some kind of things that we do. And using these simulators, we build all kinds of algorithms to improve the traffic efficiency. Actually, we have a test bed. Well, not really my team, but I work with a team who has a test bed just at the Victoria Street and around campus, where we're trying to deploy some of the strategies that we developed. Now, using this kind of simulators, one of the things that we to keep track of the location of the various vehicles on the road network. And that has something to do with their location, and that's the spatial data management. And we have to have a way to keep track of where a vehicle or a pedestrian is on the road network really, really fast, because we are talking about millions of cars and pedestrians on the road network. And to do that, we build really, really fast indexing algorithms. That's for assignment 1. except that we do it on spatial data, not one-dimensional data. If we got time, I'll try to discuss that a little bit, but let's see. Here, we use a non-machine learning-based solution, a traditional algorithmic solution, to build a demo. What it does to continuously keep track of your nearest point of interest. For example, if you've ever been driving an electric vehicle, one thing that really will concern you is your battery level. Just by when you look at your lookout for once you hit 50%, you start panicking. Electric vehicles no difference. Then you want a tool to help you keep track of where are the nearest charging points. And this is the tool that we can do that for you. And we actually got a sort of a small window to do this. Let's see whether it's in place or not. All right. So suppose you are deploying, suppose you have, let's say you are using Google Maps, and then it tells you if you want to go from, I don't know, wherever you need to go home, and you need to go this route because the other routes are too congested at the moment. And you got this route, and you want to sort of make sure that this a charging station around you, whenever you have always place that, or petrol station if you want, then our algorithm can tell you as you move along the way which are your nearest point of interest. Could be charging station or whatever, maybe just a McDonald's. And we also tell you the neighbors of the neighbors, and when we can continuously tell you this, and I think that this sounds silly and straightforward. I'll just do a scan of all the points, store them. You know how to do sorting, and I'm an expert for that now. But you have to think a bigger scale. Millions of users using all this. We talk about Google, could be even billions of users. Or of course, you are talking about then distributed processing, and indeed that's what Google is doing. But still, again, for them, every bit of saving in the computing cost for them is really money. So every bit of improvement counts. And this is kind of things that we do. And in general, that's what algorithmic research are doing, trying to squeeze a little bit further of the space, memory or time cost to run your algorithm. This is just another demo. This part of the demo is just to show if we get rid of the neural network, just consider we can freely move on a whole, let's say, a large plane or a grass ground, then you can freely move, then how this nearest point of interest will change. That's just that. By the way, you can stop me at any point if you feel interested of anything, or you can come back to me in 5 years' time and do a research project. I'm not kidding. We have a few students doing that already. Now, the previous two demos is really about like how to do things fast, how to sort of simulate a lot of vehicles in visuals, how to query it really fast. The next couple of words, they have something to do with the accuracy part. More like the second assignment, how you discover a pattern of the data. Now, the first work that I'm going to talk about is called a spatial temporal reasoning model. What it does is to try to make some predictions based on historical observations. In this particular example, what we did is trying to reason and predict what the traffic situation is going to be like in, let's say, an hour from now. Obviously, today's venue, so the pattern might be different from usual, but still based on historical observations, and we can actually predict pretty accurately using our some deep learning model, which you don't need to know. If you want to know, you probably need to study computing. Keep studying computing with us until the third year, maybe you learn about this. So that's what they have to do. And again, for this kind of predictions, intuitively, the idea is like, if you know the traffic situation of one intersection, then the chances that you probably also know the traffic situation of the intersections nearby, because the traffic pattern will go populated through nodes, right? And just like what this image shows, this is actually this color here is the predicted traffic speed by our model, and you can see that typically on most of the roads, this is actually like highway in California. Most of the roads, the traffic speed is really high, but in some urban areas, this more red and orange color point, these are still in urban areas. These are the more congested points. And we actually contrasted our prediction with some historical observations and calculations are pretty good, like within less than 5 km our kind of error. So it's pretty good. Another thing we do is called a geographic knowledge graph. It probably doesn't make sense to you except for the geographic part. Or you probably know each of these words, but when you put them together, it doesn't make sense. What's going on in here is that a few years ago, Google brought up this concept called knowledge graph. If you think about Google search engine, a few years ago, you guys probably have one already, and you might not have started using internet yet, or just a lot yet. A few years ago, Google search results is just a few items of results and tells you like these are web pages that might be relevant to a search key. But about 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, they introduced this knowledge graph technique, which tells you not only a few web pages that are relevant to your search keyword, but also there's a knowledge panel on the right-hand side of the web page and telling you a few more things, such as Wikipedia pages or some famous people that are relevant to the keyword, search keyword. Those is backed by a technique called knowledge graphs. And those knowledge graphs about knowledge that are like general domain, not particular in the spatial domain. What we did is to harvest all this, not all, but many of this spatial data, graphical knowledge, geographic knowledge on web pages, and organize them into a graph structure. Like in example 2, we have a graph, except that knowledge graph, every node is not a user, instead every node is a concept. For example, a building, this building, and some building next to it, next door, then we can build a connection between them, saying that these two buildings are next to each other. And we can put Melbourne Connect into the knowledge graph as well, and we can tell that this is the building where the computing department of Melbourne Uni is hosted in. Those kind of knowledge we all harvest it into a large graph kind of structure and use that to power some applications. In this particular application, what we want to do is to power a navigation system to produce what we thought something might be a bit more user-friendly. So what's going on is like, suppose this is actually an image that we captured before Melbourne built it. Melbourne Connect was rebuilt. This is actually, I think this is the Melbourne School of Dental Studies or something. And suppose this is the first time you visit Melbourne Uni, and then you're using some navigation service that tells you in order to get to a car park, you have to turn at this intersection. So this is what Google or whatever maps will tell you. Go ahead in 100 meters or maybe 50 meters. I haven't actually very accurately. And it will tell you to turn right at that place. Right? That's what current generation of navigator services will tell you. Now, what we wanted to do is that, well, instead of telling you ahead at 100 meters, we tell you to turn when you see this yellowish building with 3 stories. Trying to add a landmark to how is the navigation. Now, often people will challenge even saying that why it's not. That's a fair point, and I'm not saying that we've got a perfect solution. We're saying that we've got an alternative solution, which if we have a good engineering kind of team, they might be able to sort of integrate this alternative solution into these kind of mapping services. So this is kind of things what we did. Now, in order to generate this kind of navigation instructions, we have to translate the knowledge in this large knowledge graph, all these different buildings, the colors, the number of stories, into a natural sentence. And to do that, it's almost like a machine translation technique, and it's somewhat similar to the technique behind ChatGPT, where you have to. ChatGPT is just like saying it has a lot of knowledge, and you have to translate into a sentence that human beings can read. And this is somewhat like that technique, and we also use the same backbone as ChatGPT. Transformer is the model backbone. Of course, ChatGPT is a lot more advanced than our compared to the Stone Age model. Anyway, we did that and made some work out of this. Now, working on this, we have done a few fun projects out of it. Not really my core expertise, but I saw that they are quite fun, and we have colleagues in our department which are sort of hardcore experts in those. And if you're interested in those work, you can also study with them. So one of the things what we did is like in order to figure out how tall a building is or what color it is, we have to sort of get images of these buildings. How do we get images? What we do is actually we go through Google Maps, and in Google Maps, you guys know that there's these street view images. So we just plot a lot of street view images and analyze them and figure out, right, in an image of that many pixels, if there's a building of this many pixels in its height, what's corresponding height in physics, in physical buildings? That's what we do. And that's a lot of like image processing techniques, algorithm. And one particular challenge we faced was, what if those images are blocked by, for example, cars, or sometimes trees, or sometimes road signs, and we have to cut it out. But if we cut it out, we are left with the building with the hole inside of it, just like something like this. Then we have to refill it such that we can figure out the proper color and height and the other different features of the building. So we study image processing techniques, also machine learning models. This is clearly called GAN model, generative adversarial network. This, by the way, is sort of not stated anymore. At the moment, everybody's talking about this diffusion model, which generates really great arts. Actually, what they can do is that if you tell those models what you want to generate, they can generate something that is as good as an artist that can people. That's the state of art. This is like, again, Stone Age stuff, already 4 or 5 years ago. That's how fast this deep learning, machine learning field is moving at the moment. So you guys really need to, yes?
Is that what Photoshop uses?
Actually, by the time when this work just came out, Photoshop released their own tool to do this. So almost a kind of parallel work. I haven't followed this exactly because this is really not my core area. I just show this here because it's fun. And they might have moved on to using these diffusion models already. But anyway, we can sort of refill images, buildings, human facial images, bridges, and all kinds of different things. As long as there's enough image, a diverse image repository to fit in our model, it can learn. And that's about it. So that's image, and this is our last book. So if it's time is an issue. So we send this sort of image model to a video processing model. What we did is to try to remove an object from a video. For example, in here, I want to hide this person from the video. So we just basically mask this person and ask our model to generate what the video should look like after the person is masked. These are two previous models that we used to compare with, and this is what our model can do. And as we can see, if you're just looking at this frame, you cannot tell that there was previously a person in here. Right? I'll show this demo. The only thing left is just this sort of shadow. That's because we didn't mask it. We only masked the person in here. If you also mask this shadow, it will also be gone, and we will not be able to tell that previously there was a person in there. This is how good we can do it, and this is just like 3 years ago already. And the current day's technique is going to be even better. Let's see. So it might be the time to pass on to Shanna. I think just 20 minutes, and I'll finish that here. I didn't got time to show the learning base for spatial data, but by this day, come back to talk to me in 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Jianzhong, for enlightening us all with your research. And now we'll talk a little bit about what I've been doing, or at least some of my older work, because I thought it would be a little more interesting and relevant. So one thing that you might not know about me, or maybe you do, is that not only am I trained in computer science, but I also have a law degree. And so the types of problems that I like to think about are those that combine an interest in computer science with something in public policy or in law. So with that in mind, here is a quote from David Cameron, the former PM of the UK. In our country, do we want to allow a means of communication between people which even an extremist with a signed warrant from the Home Secretary personally that we cannot read? Are we going to allow a means of communications where it is simply not possible to do that? My answer to that question is no, we must not. So here he's talking about encryption. But we're not in the UK, we're in Australia, so what do Australians have to say about this problem of messages that no one else can read? Well, here is Malcolm Turnbull in 2017. The laws of mathematics are very commendable, but the only law that applies in Australia is the law of Australia. So obviously I have a few problems with this particular quote, but this drives an interest in understanding private communications and cryptography generally, because there are a lot of interests at stake. There are the interests of the people communicating, and of course the interests of the public in law enforcement, in preventing the propagation of child sexual abuse material or other dangerous content such as terrorism. So let's think back to a typical conversation that we might hear in class. So Giovanni is obsessed with energy drinks, Angela says to Josh. Unfortunately for them, Giovanni has been listening in. She has tapped into the wire, she's cut a hole in it, and is copying the communications. She hears this and is very angry about the gossip behind her back. So Angela and Josh decide to use encryption. They have a function E with a key K, and as a result, now when they communicate, they run their message, Giovanni is obsessed with energy drinks, through this function, and now Giovanni can't understand the message. It looks garbled, and only Josh and Angela can understand. So Giovanni there can't hear what's going on. What's going on? So how does this actually work? How do we build one of these protocols? So we have special functions that are designed to do this. Here we have one called AES, but it relies on the two parties communicating to have met in advance and agreed on this variable K which is the key. So we have all this other complex algorithmic machinery to allow them to do key exchange ahead of time. Now we also have a way for them to verify the identities of each other, and one of the algorithms that we'll talk about that's used quite heavily here is one called RSAs. This one in the middle there that can play the role of multiple parts in this communication between two parties. So obviously governments are a little worried about the propagation of this technology, which can allow people to communicate without necessarily sharing what they're doing with the government or with a spy listening in. So as a result, in 1993, the US imposed restrictions on this technology, saying that if you were going to use this technology, it was okay as long as you were only giving it to people in the United States. If you wanted to send it outside of the United States, you had to make sure that the secret key K that you were using was small enough that the US intelligence services could run an algorithm and break the overall security so that they could listen in, but maybe someone who wasn't as strong as the United States government couldn't. And along with a number of other proposals in other laws, the US imposed a pretty heavy system of regulation to try and prevent cryptography from getting out of control. And then in 1994, they expanded a lot of these wiretapping laws to cover not just regular landline phones, but also the internet. This is not just restricted to the United States. Australia's also put restrictions on cryptography at various points in time, including in a 2015 bill in Australia. You might have heard of that FBI v. Apple court cases that were going on when the FBI wanted to hack into an iPhone and they couldn't because it was encrypted. So this is very much a live issue in current times. And even though these only go up to 2016, still today in the United Kingdom there's a bill going through purporting to ban certain types of encryption. So if you're the government, how are you going to get around this without passing laws? Well, one thing you could try and do is actually look at the strength of the algorithms being used to protect these communications and maybe hack the algorithms. And what do I mean by hack the algorithms? All the algorithms rely on certain things being difficult. Remember, we spoke about algorithmic complexity a whole lot and said that some problems are difficult for computers to solve. But if you're the National Security Agency, the NSA, maybe you have a lot of computers and you can throw them at the cryptography. Or if you're a small team of academics and you're targeting the weakened cryptography, which was the only one that was allowed out of the United States for a while, maybe we too can break some of this cryptography. So this was some of my research, was looking at what is the strongest cryptography that a team of academics can break. And this is where a lot of algorithmic improvements and also systems improvements came in, so that we could target a real-life use cryptography just with the computers that we had on hand. Now, it may have looked a little more impressive than this thing right here. In fact, we had a few buildings worth of computers, but still the kind of thing that $10 million could buy you. So this is an algorithm called RSA. I'm not going to explain the details for you right now, but the thing to understand from this slide is in order to break RSA, which was this scheme we talked about, the thing you need to be able to do efficiently from an algorithm's point of view is break up a number into the prime numbers that make it up. So if you take the number 6, we could break that up into 3 times 2. Those are the 2 prime factors of the number 6. And so if you can do this efficiently, then you can break RSA, and if you can break RSA, you can spy on any communications that are protected by RSA. Now this is going to depend on how large the number is that you have to factor, that you have to break into pieces. If the number's really big, because the RSA problem is hard, because factoring is an algorithm that takes a lot of time, well, you're not going to be able to do it unless you get bigger and bigger computers. And as the key gets really large, as this number that we have to factor gets large, it's going to be computationally intractable. It's going to be unreasonable to do with anyone on Earth's computers. So even if we had all the computers on the Earth, hopefully it'll still be too hard to break this. But of course, we're the bad guys in this one, so we're trying to break it. So let's see what kind of computers we need to break a real-life version of these keys. So this is the factoring problem. It's much harder than multiplication, but there is an algorithm that's still not polynomial time. It doesn't run in O of n to the k, but it's better than straight exponential, and this is called the number field sieve. It's the best algorithm we know today for doing this. So how long does factoring a number take? Well, one answer would be this complicated expression, like e to the 1.923 log, like that's too complicated. So here's another answer. On real-life computers, it would take, for 512-bit RSA, before I did my work, less than a year to break a 512-bit key. So that's where the number is less than 512 digits in binary. For a 2048-bit key, that's the minimum recommended today, and even for an 1024-bit key, it would take more than 1 million core years, at least back when I did this work in about 2015, 2016. So what are the records for actually breaking 512-bit RSA? Went from 7 months in 1999 to the best in 2015, before I approached this problem, was 7 hours. And then my work at the very bottom of this is getting this down to under 4 hours, and you could probably do it in even about an hour or two today, and just with cloud computing. So we didn't even need our own computers, we just paid Amazon to spin up a few and could do it pretty fast and not so expensively. So unlike some of the algorithms in this class, the number field sieve is really complicated. So complicated that it's not just like one stage or like merge sort or quick sort. It's not just divide and then merge back together. In fact, we talk about it having 4 major stages: polynomial selection, sieving, linear algebra, and square root. And so don't worry too much about these individual stages. This algorithm is so complicated that even when I was doing my PhD and working on this algorithm, I didn't understand the whole algorithm. And even today, there are still bits of it that are worked on more by professional mathematicians rather than by computer scientists, because this algorithm is so complicated. But there are a few characteristics of the algorithm that we can know even just at your level. So the first stage, polynomial selection, is embarrassingly parallel. Now what this means is you can break it up into as many pieces as you like. Remember, with our external merge sort, we could split a file into lots and lots of different chunks, sort those chunks, and then merge them back together, and you could split it into as many chunks as you liked. This is kind of what's going on with polynomial selection. So if I have 50 computers, I can give each of the 50 computers a chunk of the problem. So this lets us run it pretty quickly in real time, because as long as we have more computers available to throw at the problem, we can just break it up into more pieces. The next is sieving. This is also embarrassingly parallel. So we could do this in a lot more time than it took for polynomial selection, but we could still split it up into as many pieces as we liked. Then there's linear algebra, and if any of you have taken linear algebra, you'll know what a drag this can be. This is a much more complicated and computationally expensive version of linear algebra, and unfortunately it's not embarrassingly parallel. So you're doing operations on a giant matrix, and so you're going to need a very hefty computer to do this. And so for these, we would typically use a computer with 1 terabyte of RAM. Now I forget who it was, maybe it was Dutch, or someone else was a video gamer and had 64 gigabytes of memory in their desktop computer. So this is orders of magnitude larger, more memory than we needed in our big machine. What's that, Liam? Can you use GPUs to help? That is an interesting question that is on the cutting edge of research. Maybe. You could definitely use special purpose circuitry though, which is probably what the NSA has for doing this. And then the last one is super fast. You can actually do it on your laptop. And there's also a version of this problem where we could do really interesting things on laptops to break large parts of internet traffic. So if you want to hear more about that, come talk to me after. So how expensive was this to do? This in the entire course of our research, so this was not factoring one number, this was like making the whole thing work, which took a couple months. We spent $2,788 on compute time on Amazon. Pretty cheap for breaking someone's real-life internet connection. So was anyone still using RSA back when we did this, of just 512 bits, given that it was known to be weak? So as a result of the export restrictions, and this is a slide showing the actual rules, it turns out that there were actually quite a lot of people on the internet still using keys this week. So in March and September of 2015, there were still millions of connections out there that we could compromise because we were able to do this mathematics quite quickly. So this shows the power of having an algorithm with different characteristics and then embracing those different characteristics. So for example, the bits that you can split them up. For the bits that you need to do on a single computer, make sure that's super, super optimized and tailor it to the computational resources you have available. Unfortunately, there was also another protocol outside of the regular internet protocol, SMTP, which is used for emails, also used a whole bunch of these keys. So while the world has moved on from 512-bit keys, hopefully partially as a result of our research, this gives you a bit of a picture about the power and interest of algorithms in protecting and securing secret information against governments, and also the power that governments might have using algorithms to kind of flip that equation. And so a thank you to all of my co-authors, including Oolong the cat over there. So what's the overall message from class, from both Jianzhong and my research, and 12 full weeks of learning about algorithms? As we said on Tuesday, the real solution depends on the real problem. So it's not just enough to think about big O time. It's not just enough to look at the clock and how long it takes to run on your computer. It's not just enough to look at the C code. All of these things have to be taken in together. You have to understand the real constraints in which you're operating in, whether that's analyzing an algorithm theoretically or trying to run it practically. Designing algorithms requires really careful thought. What is the problem? What are your constraints? What are the theoretical characteristics of your problem? How's it going to scale as your data gets bigger? And what are the practical characteristics of your solution? When you go to run it on a real machine, what aspects of the real machine are going to cause your algorithm to run either really quickly or really slow? But I know that you're actually looking for the real message from the class, and that's that algorithms are fun. So with that, we're concluding the technical content for the course, and now we're going to have a little bit of a chat about what's coming up next. So first, please, 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 please complete the end of semester survey. Because as much as your futures are dependent on your grades, Jianzhong and my futures are also dependent on our grades. I know Jianzhong has been confiding to me that he wants to be a full professor in the near future. And so if we want to make that happen, look at that lovely face. If you want to see this face on Melbourne Uni's next big campaign, fill out the end of semester survey and rate him highly. And rate me highly and rate the class highly. Say all the things you love. And the higher response rate we get, the more we can do this for other students like you. Today we have 2 cameras filming. I want to see 60 cameras. I want to have a camera pointed in every seat in the classroom. So fill out the ESS, help me make my dreams come true, give us more pizza, more props, more everything. So there's our plug. But we are aware that our class isn't perfect. There are some things we can improve. So I could have the slides uploaded a little sooner than 2 minutes before I start talking. We could try and get your marks back a little earlier. I could have fewer mistakes on the slides. Whenever there's new material, always 1 or 2 creep in. And potentially we could get you clearer assignment specs some of the time. Maybe, I don't know. I thought they were pretty good. So these are some areas that we know we can improve on. So if you write these in what could the class improve, we already do know that a bit. There are also some things where we know that some of you that might not be super popular, but things that we think are good anyway. So the videos are uploaded right now only after I've had time to edit them. But as a result, you get these beautiful pictures and you see my smiling face and Jianzhong's smiling face and exciting things from all different angles. And so even though it means we can't get them out 30 minutes after class, we think it's worthwhile. So it's something we're going to keep. Another thing we're planning on keeping is the interactive nature of lectures. So even when I'm staring directly at you, calling you out in the middle of class, even though that may be a little confronting or a little scary at times, I do think that it improves the overall pedagogical experience, and so that's something to stay. Of course, always open to hearing ways that we can improve it and make it a little easier on you, but at the end of the day, your learning is what we care about, and we think that that's something that really helps. Also, the class does have a relatively high workload, and it's gone up in recent years, but that's because we want you to be just as expert as we are in the content. And by making sure that you're keeping up to date and doing regular worksheets and doing assignments and practicing all different bits of the class, we're actually helping you in the long run, even if it feels not so fun in the short run. And then the last thing I do plan to keep is every year the material is changing. It's not the same as last year. There's new content, there's new research that's happening. And by doing this, we actually enable the class to stay up to date. So the fact that the slides aren't ready till a minute or two before is often because we're making them better. And that's something, even if I will hopefully get them out earlier, I do aim to keep making them better every year, so you can't just rely on stuff from everyone before. So that's the end of semester survey. Please, again, fill it out. It makes a big difference to us, both personally and professionally. We'd love to hear your experiences. So where to from here? There are a couple of subjects to consider. The first is the one that's offered next semester, Design of Algorithms. It's a little more rigorous than this class. First is Design of Algorithms, which isn't going to run for another 2 semesters. That's the one that runs in semester 2 every year, so you have to wait a little while. If you're interested in pursuing computer science and this was a subject you really enjoyed and you want to go down the algorithms route, I'd recommend structuring your course plan to wait to do this one. However, if this subject was a little more challenging for you and you want some more time to go over some of the material, there's another similar version of both that class and this class that's kind of halfway point between them, called Algorithms and Data Structures, that's offered every semester 1. So while there's about an overlap of about 75% of the material, it'll give you a chance to refresh your knowledge on this and have a little more practice. But again, if you're really thinking of pushing yourself, I would strongly encourage Design of Algorithms. Because that is what's actually going to take you further as opposed to rehashing a lot of the same material. So if you really enjoyed the lecture earlier this week on theory, I'd highly encourage you to take Models of Computation. That's our flagship 3rd year class that teaches computer science theory. It's actually really exciting. I know that some of the proofs were a little tricky to get through, but you've still got a bit of time to gain some maturity before tackling that subject, and I think it shows some of the most beautiful and interesting parts of computer science. If you really like the programming, the next step is to take object-oriented software development, which will teach you yet another programming language and some more paradigms around how to program. So it's less about teaching you specific algorithms and more about like, how do you structure a large program if that's something that you're looking to do for an enterprise or for a big project yourself. And then if you like me, I'm teaching information security and privacy next semester. I know FOA is better, but I would love to see you next semester regardless. This subject is non-technical, so it's probably best to think of it like a breadth subject. It's not going to enhance your core computer science expertise, but it's still quite a lot of fun. FOA is better. I won't tell you what I tell the other class. Plus, it's too late for them. They've missed out on FOA by that point. The other thing I'd strongly encourage you to do is a diploma of computing. If you like this course, if you think this stuff is fun, as much fun as I do, and you're not a computer science major, well, you're probably going to run out of space on your study plan. I was running out of space on my study plan when I was an undergraduate at Melbourne Uni, and so I did a diploma as well, and this is a way to give yourself a little more flexibility. In many, many circumstances, there is no need for you to get out of here in 3 years because life does not get better. I'm sorry. The best times of your life are now. And so you may as well take advantage of it and stay at uni a little longer, hang out with me and Jianzhong, come do some research with us, do a diploma of computing. That's my plug for it. Okay, now what I know you've really been waiting for, the exam details. So it's going to cover all the course material, and there'll be a range of difficulties of problems. There are some things that are going to be much on the easier side, where like if you've been showing up and doing your weekly stuff, you should be able to breeze through. There is also some stuff that even if you've attended every lecture in the semester and have gotten 100% thus far, there are some questions that will challenge you, and we expect them to actually challenge you to the extent that I can give you a Freddo if you get 100% on it, because the exam is actually really, really hard. Some of it, not all of it. Some of the exam is perfectly balanced, but there are 1 or 2 questions that are really meant to challenge you. So the basics, what will you be asked to do on the exam? It's pen and paper. So if you aren't practicing pen and paper coding already, now's the time. Write some basic functions, learn how to write basic type declarations if you haven't already. Assignment 2 is due, so it's a good time to make sure you know how to do these things, along with some very, very basic analysis of algorithms. So make sure you're not neglecting those components of the class as well. What do you have to do to pass? Here's a list of a couple things that we would really expect you to know just to get by in class. So what are the different representations of the types, and what are the types? What is an integer? What is a float? What is a char? How do they work in C? Simple functions, so your loops, your basic functions, if-else, accessing arrays, reading strings. How to use pointers. Now, hopefully we're not going to make you do too much hairy pointer arithmetic. We're not going to get you to trace segfaults in any programs. But you do need to understand how pointers work and what they're used for, and where a function might take in a pointer, and why or why not a pointer might be useful. Structs are definitely going to be on there. And the last one I'd also encourage you to do is, even though Project 1 was a little while away, make sure you brush up on what actually happened in it, and the same for Project 2, because we are going to build on that to give you a kind of a gentle way into getting into the exam. We're also going to test a bit about algorithms, so recursion and trade-offs involved in various different ways of implementing recursive data structures, so lists and trees and arrays. What are the trade-offs of using one for the other? How do they work? And then we are going to also cover, remember we had this whole big thing on hash tables and the different ways to resolve when 2 things hash to the same space. I'd also make sure you brush up on that as well. Basic big O analysis, your basic sorting algorithms, and of course, our phone book that we tore into, binary search and linear search. So that's the kind of the basics that you should hope to have a relatively good control of. There are also some things that you will want to have to do well. If you're targeting like a better grade, make sure that you've covered pattern matching and string search. Make sure that you've had some practice using functions on lists and trees, so writing your own traversals. The details of quicksort, merge sort, heap sort, and their trade-offs, why is one better than the other, and then priority queues and their implementation. So this slide is getting a little more advanced. If you can do all the things on the first 2 slides, you're in relatively good shape. Here are the things if you're already feeling good about that. And then if you're really, really pushing it, if you're like, I'm going to ace this subject, I'm going to get that Freddo from Dr. Cohney, here are the last few things that you're going to need. So not only will you need to have a command of the things that we have already taught you how to do, you have to be able to push those things a little further. So there'll be a few questions that test, do you have a little bit of creativity and algorithmic insight? Can you think about a problem abstractly and use the problem-solving strategies that we talked about this week to come up with something new and a little bit insightful that'll allow you to solve a problem? So if you're worried about if you're going to pass the subject or not, don't worry too much about these questions. They will be on the exam. We're not going to mark them. But if you see something that says, and you think, oh, I don't think we've covered that in class, and you're pretty sure that you already know your basics, feel free to leave that question and focus on the other things and only come back if you're feeling that you have extra time for it. So how to prepare for the exam. Because this is an exam in person, triple check the exam time, set alarms, and make sure you actually get there. There is a limited amount we can do if you're not there for your exam. Make sure you've watched all the lectures, read the textbook, done the ed exercises. We've given you a wealth of material. And if you've actually completed all the material, you should naturally be in pretty good shape. If you're not, we will also have some times posted for the first year center to give you a little extra help. But the regular sessions in the first year center do end this week. So practice programming without a computer. The exam's going to require you to program without a computer. So grab a few friends, grab some Domino's pizza, hang out in Melbourne Connect, and start doing these problems by hand. Take the same exercises that you did in ed, and now try and solve them without the compiler there. And for the exam, write pseudocode. At least write something for the question, even if you feel unable to solve the problem in C. You might still get some points. How many, we can't guarantee, but better to have tried than leave it blank. And if you have extra time, feel free to draw a nice picture or write us a note. We love seeing those when we're huddled with our box of Domino's pizza grading your exams. So finishing up, sit the exam even if you think you might have already failed the class. It's much harder for us to fail you if you've done well on the exam than if you haven't showed up at all. And so we take everything into account when deciding what score you get at the end. Now, obviously, we're not going to bump things up for absolutely no reason, but if you've made a real effort, we will make every effort to make sure that you get through this class. As much as a very small part of me would like to see you a year from now here, the larger part of me thinks you should all be doing better things with your lives. So make sure you pass this class and at least show up to the exam. Assignment 2 grades and feedback will be out before the exam, so if that's helpful to you, look forward to it, but also please, please, please submit assignment 2, because we know that lots of you haven't at this point, and it's getting a little late. There will be office hours by appointment, as well as a few extra first year center hours, and some of those John Jong and myself will show up to. Eat, sleep, and exercise, and we'll put an announcement out about sample exams very shortly. So with that, there's only really one thing left.
Another turning page, our class has just begun. Welcome to FOA, hello world, now we'll run. So do your merge, sort right into erase, divide. Complexity of sorts, there's items there to find. My code is undebuggable, but when all said and done, each and every algorithm's fun. We're writing all in C with pointers and with stacks. You're fixing buggy code with printfs and with hacks. Now do a proof or two, I promise they're not bad. And when it all just works, I know that you'll be glad. With every problem overcome and all solutions spun, each and every algorithm's fun. In this world of silicon with computation spun, let it be our algorithms fun. After class, after exams, when FOA is done, I hope you'll still say algorithms are fun.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good time with exams. Stay in touch, and remember, algorithms are fun. Thank you all.